This is the next in a series of video blogs describing the spokes of the Oyster Wheel, featuring Spoke 2 from Hampton Court to Tower Bridge. I will look at the route, highlight any challenges and describe the sights along the way. To link it together, I'm using the Ordnance Survey's fly-through capability, which provides an overview of the route from the air. Spoke 2 uses the National Cycle Network Route 4 to travel from Hampton Court to Chelsea, before taking London Quietways through Brompton Cemetery and past the South Kensington museums to Hyde Park. It then picks up Cycle Superhighway 3, which takes it on to Tower Bridge via Buckingham Palace, Westminster and the Embankment. It's 37 kilometres long and has one very short climb in Richmond Park. Under wheel it's largely tarmac except for the two sections beside the Thames. There are a number of major roads to be navigated, mostly by crossings, although there is one crossing of the Fulham Road that needs particular care. And the Quietways are unsegregated from traffic. Overall it's about 3 hours of cycling, plus time for stops. The start at Hampton Court Station is across the Thames from Hampton Court Palace, famous for its Tudor architecture and annual flower show. The original palace was built by Cardinal Wolsey in the early 16th century. Henry VIII was a frequent visitor and soon took it as his home, and by the 1530s was hosting lavish parties in its state and private apartments. Edward VI was born here, his mother Jane Seymour died here, and Charles I imprisoned before famously escaping, where the palace was saved from subsequent destruction during the Commonwealth period by Cromwell choosing to live in it. Charles II readopted it and created the Longwater Lake for his honeymoon, before William and Mary commissioned Christopher Wren to build a new Baroque palace, and reworked the gardens to include the maze. It fell out of favour in the 1740s with only grace and favour residents, before Queen Victoria opened it to the public in 1838. Route 4 is picked up here along with the Thames Path, with the palace and park on one side and the expensive houses of Thames Ditton on the other. After 5 kilometres of easy riding, Kingston Bridge is reached. This was the first traditional crossing point of the river above London Bridge, and the adjacent town, being on the boundary of the ancient kingdoms of Wessex and Mercia, was the first royal borough, hence the name Kingston, and the site of consecration for 2 kings and the crowning of several others. After navigating the town centre, the Thames is soon rejoined with another pretty section to Teddington Lock. This is the westmost extent of the tidal reach of the Thames, and as such is the boundary between the legal authority of the Port of London and the Environment Agency. The first timber lock was built here in 1811 and rebuilt in stone in 1857. The barge lock, the largest on the river, was subsequently built in 1905. Here we leave the river to cut across its meanders before joining it again at Putney. The first settlement reached is that of Ham, site of the 17th century Ham House, now owned by the National Trust, which can be seen down the end of its avenue from Ham Common. This was built in 1610 for the sons of James I, but was given by Charles I to one of his close friends. Ownership was maintained through the Civil War, and on restoration of the monarchy it was transformed into a grand Stuart house and became the seat of the Earls of Dysart until 1935. Heading onwards, after 10k we passed through Ham Gate into Richmond Park, which was enclosed as a deer park by Charles I in 1637. It is Britain's second largest urban wall park, and at 2,360 acres is the largest SSSI in London. It is famous for its deer and also for its invertebrate habitats with trees allowed to decay naturally, whilst the Isabella plantation is renowned for its spring azaleas and camellias. After passing the Pen Ponds Cafe, the route reaches White Lodge, a former hunting lodge built for George II but now home to the Royal Ballet School. Route 4 then drops down, crosses the Beverley Brook and heads out into Roehampton and Barnes. Cycleways and crossings avoid the busiest roads, although care should be taken at side road junctions. The route crosses 2 level crossings over a busy line out of Waterloo. It's unusual not to be stopped here, before passing Barnes Common, a site of nature conservation interest renowned for its open acid grassland. Shortly afterwards, the Barnes Green Lion Houses conservation area is reached. Built at the turn of the century, popular legend suggests that the builder ordered 1,000 stone lions by mistake instead of 100. As a result, they have been used with abandon to decorate many elements of each house. It then heads for the London Wetlands Centre, managed by the Wildflower and Wetlands Trust. This site was formerly 4 Victorian reservoirs and has been converted into a variety of wetland habitats with a range of rare birds. When it opened in 2000, it was the first urban project of its type in the UK. After 19 kilometres, the Thames path is reached again, with gravel and then a tarmac road to Putney Bridge. There was a ferry here until 1729, when the first bridge was built. It's the starting point for the annual Oxford and Cambridge boat race, and the starting stone can be found on the south bank just before the bridge. On crossing the bridge, a diversion can be taken to the left to visit Fulham Palace. This was the former residence of the Bishop of London from the 11th century until 1973. The current Grade 1 listed building dates from the early 1500s, and its walled garden was nationally important in the late 17th century. The palace and its surrounding park and gardens are open each day. The next section through Chelsea is on relatively busy roads, heading round the Hurlingham Club, famous for polo, past the houses and shops of Imperial Wharf and across the King's Road, Chelsea and the Fulham Road, both of which require care. Once through, we are rewarded with a cycle through Brompton Cemetery, one of the magnificent 7 cemeteries created by private companies in the 19th century to ease overcrowding in parish grounds, and the only one of which is a royal park. Whilst not as well known as Highgate, its Grade 1 listed domed chapel and open colonnades evoke an open-air cathedral, and amongst its 35,000 monuments are those for Emmeline Pankhurst, Dr. John Snow, who discovered the cause of cholera, and John Wisden. Quietways then head on through impressively restored residential terraces and squares to reach South Kensington and its museums. This area was popularly known as Albertopolis after Prince Albert, who proposed the creation of a permanent buildings for the benefit of the public, using the profits from the Great Exhibition in 1851, which had been held nearby in Hyde Park. 3 main museums were built. The first on the left of Exhibition Road is the Natural History Museum, specialising in earth and life sciences, which was built in 1880 and is faced in terracotta tiles to resist soot. Opposite on the right is the Victoria and Albert Museum, with its focus on applied and decorative arts and design, including ceramics, glass, textiles and sculptures, and built in 1899. Finally, on the left is the Science Museum, which separated from the Victoria and Albert in 1909, and whose building dates from the 1920s. After 29 kilometres, at the top of Exhibition Road, we pass the Royal Geographic Society, sponsors of expeditions around the world, before entering into Hyde Park. On the left can be seen the Albert Memorial, erected by Queen Victoria in memory of her husband in 1872. The 176-foot high monument contains a gold leaf decorated statue of Albert, together with sculptures representing the 4 industrial sciences, 4 continents and 4 arts. The park itself is the largest of the 4 royal parks and was enclosed by Henry VIII as a hunting ground before being opened to the public in 1637. It contains the Serpentine, created by damming the river Westbourne as part of landscaping by Queen Caroline in the 1720s, and used now for public boating and swimming. Many major events have been held in the park, from the Great Exhibition to live concerts and the 2012 Olympics. We turn down Rotten Row. Its name derived from Route du Roi, as it was a carriage drive created in 1690 by William III to reach his new residence at Kensington Palace. This was the first highway in Britain to be artificially lit, using at the time 300 oil lamps. At the south-east corner of the park, we reach Hyde Park Gate, a grand entrance designed in 1820, and in the middle of Hyde Park corner roundabout, the Wellington Arch, recently restored by English Heritage, which can be climbed to get a good view of the surroundings. The arch was built to celebrate Britain's victories in the Napoleonic Wars, and was originally sited closer to the gate, but moved and reorientated in 1883 to reduce traffic congestion. From this point onwards, the route joins that of Spoke 3 along Cycle Superhighway 3, so to avoid repetition, please listen to the detailed video guide for that route. CS3 itself heads down Constitution Hill, past Green Park, Buckingham Palace and St James's Park to reach Westminster, with the Houses of Parliament and Westminster Abbey. It then rejoins the Thames to head along the Embankment as far as Blackfriars, before following a parallel course to reach the northern end of Tower Bridge and the end of our tour. I hope you've enjoyed this cross-section through the palaces and parks alongside the Thames. I produced this guide with the aim of raising money for pancreatic cancer, so if you've liked the route, then please consider donating to my Just Giving page.